The Victory Machine is the new book. We talked about it a bunch yesterday, but Ethan Strauss is the author. And Ethan, let's start with this. The biggest, not bombshell, but excerpt was over a conversation you had with Kevin Durant in Sacramento. It was after you'd written about how the Warriors were trying to change their offense to make him happier, to be better for Kevin Durant, and he took issue with it. When you look back and you read your work, how does it feel Kevin Durant comes off to you?
Just very vulnerable. Very vulnerable. Somebody who's struggling with a lot of things. I think there's this idea that it's all meant as criticism. I don't see it that way. I see it as I'm just describing what was happening with the personalities on the team during that time. And what was happening in the broader sense, and the reason why it all fell apart and broke up, was that at a certain point, the Warriors were getting more from Kevin Durant than Kevin Durant was getting from the Warriors. And they weren't satiating him. He wasn't happy there. He wanted out. He made that clear very early on, even if he didn't announce it and even if he was defensive about it when people asked him about it in public. And it was about discontent. And in those moments, he wasn't very happy.
Are his complaints valid from this standpoint? See, when I read it, and again, just reading the excerpts, because you didn't send me a free book. The book is called Victory Machine.
Hey. To be clear, almost nobody got a free book because the shelter-in-place order hit New York City, where the warehouse is with all the books. But we can get you some digital copies. I just want to make that clear. You should have gotten.
I'm messing with you. Ethan Strauss joining us. The one point, and look, I think my read on KD has been for a while that I think he lives in his phone and on Twitter way too much. Yeah. Right? Like he just, and I've even said I think he's got a little bit of an addiction to it, right? Where we try and tell people all the time, like, that's not the real world. It feels like the real world, but it's just not. That said, in the insular world of social media, there's an infatuation, and I think media members do have an infatuation with Steph. Is it a fair critique on any level to say, hey, even if this is true, that Kevin Durant can be all of these things and you have to change who you are offensively, like Steph's not the perfect player and no one points out his flaws? Is that a fair critique if that was the way he framed it?
I think it's a fair critique in many ways, although there is a lot of national media who would be more inclined to point out Steph's flaws. But, a lot of life, I think, it's not necessarily about being right or wrong. It's better to be right. But sometimes it's about how you handle being right, how you handle insights into a way you might be slighted or a way in which you're not getting your due credit. And to grapple with that and to express yourself in a way that doesn't make it more of a situation or find a way to be at peace with it. And I think that's also where he might have had some legitimate grievances here, but at the same time, if he was so unhappy with a situation that many would say is one of the most optimal situations in basketball history, then maybe the issue wasn't the situation.
Fair enough. Ethan Strauss joining us on the Doug Gottlieb Show on Fox Sports Radio. Did those guys change? I think that's my biggest question. Not having read the book is what happens so much in sports and in music, in TV, in radio, in writing, in business is you get that early success and everybody tells you how great you are and it goes to your head and you can, even if you don't want to, you can change. Did the core four change?
I think there was a huge element of that. I think that, I don't think Steph and Klay were entirely changed by the process, but the dynamic you're talking about is real, but so too is another dynamic that makes it even more acutely felt, which is that not only do people get a big head, not only do egos expand, but it doesn't solve all their problems. It doesn't. They won. They thought that it would solve all their problems. And suddenly you get a text when you're on the plane back from having won the championship, and it's, there's this thing you've got to handle, and, the parade's messed up, and can you talk to this guy about that, and can you do this? And, you really need to do this promo for us. All your problems are still there. And in a way, winning is the thing we all care about. It's what draws us to the game. It's why we're going to watch the documentary on the Bulls. It's why hopefully a bunch of people are going to read this book. It's because the Warriors won a lot. But in a way, it's also a bit of a lie. If you're miserable before you win, you're still going to be miserable after you win. So that's what the disease of more is, or the disease of me, or whatever Pat Riley calls it. It's not only that people get a big ego, it's also that they just discovered that the thing they were searching for wasn't really the solution.
Fair. Ethan Strauss joining us on the Doug Gottlieb Show on Fox Sports Radio. How does Steve Kerr, what does Steve Kerr appear like from your observations?
Are you talking about in general? Are you talking about,
Well, let's start with in general, and then we'll take a deeper dive into each.
Well, he doesn't go down the list. He doesn't like Donald Trump. He does like ball movement. We can go on down the line of Steve's personality ticks. I think Steve is somebody who believes in leadership. I think that's partially why he's really gotten into it with the aforementioned Donald Trump. He believes in the power of it. And what was interesting talking to him was just seeing how informed his philosophy was and what the Warriors did by football. It's not something I would have expected. I knew that he had a relationship with Pete Carroll. I know that he went up to the Seahawks training camp and visited, but I didn't know that he was talking to multiple coaches. I didn't know that he met with Bill Parcells, in the lead up to taking over the Warriors. He really, and you wouldn't think it, he really learned and leaned on the NFL to coach his NBA team, and it seems to have been a tremendous success.
Yeah, did you figure out why he turned down the Knicks? Because if we think back to when he took the job, everybody thought he was taking the Knicks job. Was that simply leverage? Because the Warriors job didn't come open immediately.
Well, I think he knew what the issues were in New York, and the Warriors job didn't come open immediately. I mean, a lot of it was probably because Stan Van Gundy didn't take the Warriors job. It was open for him, but he wanted more power, and he got more power in Detroit. He had been through this situation where Dwight Howard had effectively ousted him, and I think Stan Van Gundy wanted to protect himself from that. And so it was really fortuitous, I think, for Kerr and for the Warriors because, and this is what Warren Legary, agent to coaches, tells me, is that teams always overcorrect. They go for the exact opposite personality of what they just hired. We do the same thing with dating, I think. And, Stan Van Gundy would have been that hard-ass corrective to players coach Mark Jackson, but it would have been an overcorrection. So in a way, I think they lucked out by getting denied the thing that they wanted as a team.
Yeah, that's a little bit of the story of the Warriors, right? That they didn't get Stan Van Gundy, and they end up with the perfect coach for them. They offered up Steph Curry in a trade for Andrew Bogut, right? They said, "Hey, pick either one of these two guards."
They did more. They did more than that. I mean, you could read the book, but as a tease, Steph and Klay Thompson were dangled for Chris Paul, and Chris Paul didn't want to come to the Warriors. So that all happened too. So they tried to deal Steph at various points, and it all worked out for them in the end.
Crazy, right? I mean, the whole thing is okay. So is it fixable? They talked. Joe Lacob, their owner, we're so far ahead of everybody else. Okay, that's fine, but they're going to catch up to you. Has the league caught up to what they've done?
Their bodies might have caught up to themselves. Draymond had a very rough season, and we'll see how he does when Klay returns and when Steph returns, and he's gotten some rest. But there's concern that these guys are not in the middle of their primes or on the upswing. And so I think it's less about how they were employing a strategy that nobody else is employing, and it's more, are their bodies wearing down? Do they miss some of those veterans? Can they get some pieces back? I mean, these are the questions, and it's all been thrown into flux by the whole situation the world and the NBA is dealing with, where you don't even know what the salary rules are going to be or when anything is going to happen.
Doug Gottlieb Show here on Fox Sports Radio. What's the feeling like with Kevin Durant leaving? You mentioned that was in our previous discussions and in the book. The blow up on the floor with Draymond Green was seen as kind of a seminal moment, and that was the point of no return. How was it left? Because KD has for a good period of time he took strictly the high road. What are the feelings about Kevin Durant left behind in the Warriors organization?
I think they're complicated. obviously complicated. Joe Lacob is quite thankful, and there is a mural of Kevin Durant at Chase Center. He's well represented. They were very careful not to take shots. Joe Lacob said that we're going to retire his number immediately after he left, and he left in a way where he didn't really thank them or thank the fans or anything else. So a lot of people around the league were, either rolling their eyes at it or raising their eyebrows because it was a little surprising. But I think there's an understanding that it was a process that was difficult for Kevin, and that it ultimately worked out. And there's a thankfulness, and I think also there was a relief of not having to deal with the whole thing anymore because it was getting tiresome. The story had run out.
Why is he so unhappy?
I mean, that's a tough question, right? That might be something within himself. That might be, who knows? But I think the thing that makes us unhappy as a general rule, our happiness is inversely correlated with the time we spend thinking about how other people think about us. I think you've experienced that. I think other people listening have experienced that. It's why having kids is great, because suddenly you start thinking about somebody who's not yourself and not about what people think about you. You start thinking about others and you're giving instead of just looking for more and more validation. I think when you get caught in that loop, that addiction, as you call it, and it's all about what strangers are saying about you, that's not a good place to be. It just isn't.
Do you think he'll be happier in Brooklyn?
I hope so. I don't know. He's had a lot of time to think. He didn't play this season. He's had basketball for so long. I know he had the injury in Oklahoma City earlier, but he's had basketball as this constant in his life. And I think a lot of guys, after retirement, they become more people. They're not having everything done with them or for them, and they're off the journey. They get to grapple with who they are. Maybe that process is happening for him. He's a very introspective guy.
What is Klay Thompson's role in all this? Obviously, but he's a different cat than Steph. Steph's become kind of a family man, right? Steph's won the MVPs. Draymond is the outspoken guy. How when somebody puts down your book, what are they going to walk away thinking about Klay Thompson?
I think Klay Thompson is what you see is what you get. I don't think there's going to be any new sheen on Klay. Klay is this strange, accidentally charismatic Keanu Reeves with a jump shot type character. And I think that's frustrating if you're somebody like Kevin Durant, because Klay does anything and we love it, right? Klay shows up to practice an hour late sometimes or forgets when it is, and everybody laughs. And, oh, that's Klay. He's spacey. What are you going to do? He's got this strange accidental likability because Klay doesn't need people to like him, because he's not paying attention to it, because he has a flip phone. When we sense that somebody doesn't need our love, we're more inclined to give it to them. When we sense that somebody's insecure and they need our validation, well, then paradoxically, we withhold it.
That's really okay. And then what about Steph? He's so beloved by so many. He has been a breakthrough player in the NBA, right? Look, I'm as guilty as anybody for going I don't know, not really a point, not really physical enough. So dependent on the three. He's got to have a volume of it. He's an incredible passer, but he's also a high turnover guy. But he's just beloved. When I put down your book, and by the way, the book is called Victory Machine: The Making and Unmaking of the Warriors Dynasty. Ethan Strauss is the author, and he joins us here on the Doug Gottlieb Show on Fox Sports Radio. I'm going to walk away thinking, what about Steph Curry?
That he sacrificed billions of dollars for Under Armour, of which obviously he had a stake in, for the sake of winning and for the Warriors organization. Because when you look at a before and after of Under Armour's stock price and how they were doing, it really all comes to a halt when Steph says, okay, I'm joining the recruiting pitch to get Kevin Durant on the team because that's going to help us win a bunch of championships. That really knocked Steph off the pedestal of being maybe the face of the league and a guy who was in the MVP conversation. It was that choice. So ultimately, and I don't think it was easy for him, we come away learning that he made a choice for the sake of winning that sacrificed some ego to do it.
That's interesting. Do you believe there's a true direct correlation between their stock price and him doing that? Aren't there other factors at play?
I mean, obviously there are other factors, and Under Armour invested in workout technology, and I think they might have gotten headed off at the pass by Nike and who knows what. But if you look in the book and you read it, you'll see that there is a before and after there, and it exacerbated a lot of tension between Kevin Plank, the CEO at the time, and Steph, and it seemed like that decision, the pro Warriors decision, was the anti Under Armour decision.
If he could go back, do you believe he'd make the same decision?
I do. I think it was a different situation for him than some of these other guys who reached the number one spot, because Steph was never supposed to be that guy. He was not supposed to be the face of the league. And I think he thought he was damn good and was going to have a great career, but I don't think he thought he was going to be what he became. And we forget how crazy it was. I remember his bodyguard telling me that I'm guarding 1985 Michael Jackson. You know, I would be at practice and people would jump out of the bushes. It was freaky, and people would run after him. And you know, that spotlight glare, if you never really saw it coming and you never had it in your plan, I think it can be a little bit bright. And I don't think he exactly hated taking a bit of the edge off of it.
Would Kevin Durant make the same decision if he could?
As far as coming to the Warriors versus not coming to the Warriors? Whew. I don't know. I mean,
has anybody ever actually asked him that?
Well, he hasn't had a tremendous amount of media contact after he went to the Nets, right? So it wasn't in the rear view for a lot of the time. Obviously, I reached out to him for the book, and you could see what the response is at the beginning of one of the chapters. But yeah, we don't know, I think, what he would have done, or if he has any regrets. I'm assuming he will say that he didn't regret the decision he made, but who knows what he wants in his heart of hearts.
Yeah, no, he would say he didn't regret it. Then he'd come back and say, well, maybe I kind of regret it. And then 3 months later, he'd say, I totally regret it. And then he'd come and say, like, why are you guys making me say I would regret it? I don't really regret anything.
That's the exact pattern. Yes. That's the exact pattern. You nailed it.
Ethan Strauss, the book is Victory Machine. It is available digitally on Kindle. You can order on Amazon or wherever you order your books. The Making and Unmaking of the Warriors Dynasty. I am led to believe it is a fascinating read simply because of the excerpts and what everybody tells me in the business. As soon as I get it, I will pour through it. I'll report back. I cannot wait. Ethan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Doug.